AITA for punishing my son after he said something racist? About a week ago, my 39F family ordered Chinese food for delivery. When the delivery driver came to the door, my daughter, 16F, was taking the cat upstairs to put in her room because he always tries to eat the food. My son, 13M, loudly says, "Make sure to hide the cat from the Chinese guy," as I am at the door getting the food from the Chinese delivery driver. He very obviously heard what my son said and was upset by it. I quickly apologized and took the food. I told my son that racist jokes were completely unacceptable and very wrong, and he refused to admit that he was in the wrong. So, later that night I forced my son to write a sincere apology to the delivery driver. His name was on the receipt, as well as write a one-page paper on Chinese culture and a one-page paper on why racism is perpetuated by racist jokes and stereotypes. Then the next day I took him to the restaurant and had him read his apology aloud to the delivery driver as well as give him the papers he wrote. The driver was very appreciative of the apology and thanked me for making my son do it. He then told my son about multiple instances where he had faced racist comments and attacks from people while he was a delivery driver. That night my husband, 43M, and I got into an argument about me making our son do this. He told me that it was embarrassing for our son to have to do the apology and that the punishment didn't fit the crime. I told him that it was much more embarrassing for the driver to have to face that kind of racism and racist stereotypes and that our son would get over the embarrassment. I do not condone any kind of hateful thinking in my house, and the fact that my son said that embarrassed me as well. My husband told me that it was just a joke, and it wasn't that big of a deal. I feel like I might have overreacted some, but I think it's important to help my son understand how what he said was wrong and hurtful. NTA. Sounds like your husband could use the lesson too. NTA. Your son may have been embarrassed, but he should be embarrassed for having said a racist joke. That kind of joke is meant to embarrass and humiliate the target, the delivery guy. You did right by your son by turning that around and showing him that his attitudes and jokes are the real embarrassment. Soon he will be too old to teach not to be racist. You are a great parent and I hope your son takes this lesson to heart. NTA. Your husband's attitude is precisely the problem and is why systemic racism continues to propagate in this country. Kudos to you for a very just and well thought out lesson for your son, which I hope he can truly learn from and perhaps help solve some of the issues that are breaking our society apart. Perhaps your husband needs to do some similar homework in our ed grads to what racism is and how it harms not simply the people it is directed at, but all people as a whole. Honestly, I am so proud of you, in the most non-condescending way possible, for being such an excellent example of a person for your family. NTA. You held him accountable for his actions. What he said was not funny, it was wildly inappropriate and also hurtful. The reason his behavior is so wrong, is because that stereotype that Asians eat cats and dogs, comes from this nasty belief that all Asians are barbaric people. This prejudice dates really far back, and became even more prevalent during and following World War II. The fact that this prejudice still exists despite the American obsession with Japanese anime and K-pop, says a lot, it really does. This is why education is so important, and that is exactly what you gave your son. Edit. Just because some poverty-stricken cities in China consume cats and dogs, doesn't make the stereotype okay. The origins of that stereotype are from the US, not what happens in China. People were convinced that Chinese who operated takeout restaurants would steal their pets and eat them. This stereotype has been applied to all Asians, not just Chinese. And I promise you, most Asians would like you to stop thinking they all steal pets, because they certainly do not. Edit number 2. Thank you for the award, kind person. You are awesome. Edit number 3. Thank you for the Sneck Award. Snakes are my fave animals, laughing face. I agree. When I was growing up, my childhood best friend happened to be the only Asian child at our predominantly white school. She was constantly made subject to jokes about eating cats and dogs as well as slurs to the point where she dropped out and became homeschooled. It was horrible for me to watch and obviously even so much worse for her to have to withstand. The punishment exactly fit the crime. You wanted your son to understand the consequences for his actions, for individuals and for the culture at large. Your decision was smart and thoughtful, and more apropos than grounding him or whatever else. I'm particularly confused that your husband objects to the apology. Asking a teenager to apologize to someone they were extremely rude to is baseline responsible parenting. NTA. Well, your husband can piss off because it is nothing compared to the racist stuff that driver has probably gone through in his life. Like you said, he told your son about some of his experiences. All of those were likely worse than the embarrassment your son felt. Sorry that your husband doesn't understand. You did a good job. Honestly, it was a fair punishment. NTA. You did the right thing. You 100% held him accountable, and that delivery driver deserved an apology. NTA. My God, set up a parenting school or start a magazine or something. Amazing. How did your son feel about it after writing the letter and essay and then after meeting the driver? He was definitely embarrassed by the situation, but I think it made an impression and helped him understand why what he did was wrong. Honestly, I am pretty sure I know which friend of his he learned these types of jokes from, and I am conflicted on whether or not I should continue to let him be friends with this boy. I don't want to be controlling over who he is allowed to be friends with, but at the same time, I don't want him to be associating himself with someone who has those types of beliefs. Sounds like your husband has the same sense of humor, or at least condones it in his son. Unfortunately, if you tried to ban the friend, I don't think it would work. You can't really control if they talk in school, and if your son has a phone or when he gets one, that would be difficult to control as well. You're definitely spot on with correcting behavior, so just keep doing that as things arise and keep trying to instill morals in him as well. I'm more concerned by your husband's reaction. Your son may pick up on that, and that may make it more difficult for him to take these lessons to heart. NTA. Your son did something wrong and you corrected him. That's all there is to it. Your husband, however, seems like he condones that kind of humor, and chances are your son picked it up from him. Not sure if that's the case, but it is 100% a learned behavior. NTA. You handled your son's misbehavior appropriately. Now for the bigger problem: where did he learn such dumbassery? Hint. Which parent is minimizing and making excuses for such racism? You need to have it out with your husband about a. Having your back when you discipline your son, and b. WTF kind of racist shit is he teaching your kids? I honestly believe he is learning these types of jokes from a friend he met at the beginning of the school year. This is definitely the first time I've ever heard him make a joke like that, and my husband says it's the first time he's heard it as well. My husband has never said anything racist or followed any kind of racist ideas to my knowledge, but I'm pretty upset that my husband can't see how racist jokes are wrong and unacceptable. I get that he's your husband, but if he's willing to use the "it's just a joke" line, he definitely could have made these jokes without you knowing. It sounds like your husband participates in the white privilege of considering himself not racist because he doesn't personally tell racist jokes, while also not seeing what the big deal is if others around him partake. Edit. Thank you for my first 2 awards.